Hello everyone, thank you for joining us again for another video. Just wanted to kind of start doing something a little new, some additional content for the channel as we continue to grow into the new year. One of the things that wanted to kind of jump into is starting to present some posing sessions or some different types of showcases on some of the individual figures here in the collection. I know for myself personally that as I've continued to grow my collection over the last almost 10 years or so, that I have looked to other people here in the 1/6 scale community for different types of inspiration and different types of tips and tricks on how to continue to grow my collection and to make my collection look the best that it possibly can. I know for myself personally, one of the most important pieces of my collection is being able to display it in a way that makes it pop and makes it look exciting to anybody that I show that collection to. These figures, of course, are not made to just sit in a box and kind of not be displayed. They're made to be shown, they're made to be posed, and they're made to kind of really stand out to those who you'd like to show your collection to. So wanted to get started on a new types of series. The first one that I'd like to jump into is the original Mandalorian figure, which is now sold out on Sideshow Collectibles' website, and it's going to become a very sought-after figure, especially with that Beskar Mando coming out soon as well. So, wanted to go in, do a couple different poses here, go over some tips and tricks, and go from there. So sit back, relax, and thank you again for joining us today. Alright, so for pose number one, wanted to kind of start simple. Start with the accessories you have here right as you pull your original Mandalorian out of the box. This is kind of set up very similar to that iconic walking pose that you see on the original Season 1 poster of the Mandalorian. We have all of the kind of additional accessories here on the Mando figure right now. We have the blaster rifle there across his back. We do have the gun in the holster, along with those different items there. Now this one's pretty simple, just kind of the biggest thing to always keep an eye on when you're posing your figure, no matter what pose, whether it be a simple pose like this or something that gets a little more involved. Biggest piece is always thinking about the movement. So I always like to think to myself, if I was standing in that armor, what type of way would I move? What's the weight of that armor? What is the way that my body would shift depending on the direction I'm walking in, the different action that I'm taking at that time? So it's really about kind of fine-tuning and specifically looking at those different joints that are available to you in that 1/6 scale figure that use those different joints and functionalities to your advantage. Play around with those shoulders, the elbows, those different items here. So we can see a little close-ups of those different sections individually that we've gone over to show you how you can utilize those different joints and different features to have a great look in this particular case. Moving here into pose number two. Now, just going a little bit further from that first kind of simple pose that we started with, now leaning a bit more into that pose of when the Mandalorian is in the cantina in the beginning of that first episode, where he's leaning in and firing off a shot. Now, the biggest thing to use too is not only use your imagination for what you feel looks the best for that figure and how it's going to present in your collection, but also use the reference that you have available. Pull up the show on the streaming service. Pull up some screenshots online and look at some of those individual angles and positions that the actor is in when they're making that particular shot. What way is the helmet positioned? What way and what angle is the arm position when the gun comes out of the holster ready to shoot? Look at those different angles. What way is the cape draped across his shoulder. So like in this particular case, I was looking at the image from the first episode and how it's draped over that particular shoulder. So trying to get as close as possible to that same look as it did in that particular episode. Alright, so now kind of getting into the more action type of poses, going off of those initial poses that we started with. This going off of that scene when the Mando is attacked or kind of confronted by the remnant stormtroopers while going to see the client in the first episode. Now in this case, once again, using that reference as a tool to refer to the position of the direction he's looking in, the position of those different blasters and where they're going, and how their arms are posed in this particular case. Now, of course, depending on how that figure is particularly made, there may be some additional limitations on how you can pose that figure. You don't want to push it too much to your limits. Now, of course, if it's your personal figure, you have the comfortability of how far you would like to push that figure. But in particular cases like this, for this Mando figure, there is a fat suit, as they call it, underneath that armor that does restrict some of the different directions that you can point his arms. You can't get his arm at a full 90-degree angle as it was in that initial screen grab that we see for this pose, but you can get pretty close as possible. I'm pretty impressed on how far he could go to get into this particular pose, and it is a nice pose to get into. So using those different accessories, using the different hands that are provided to you by Hot Toys to get that dynamic look and use those different options that are available to you here. One of those biggest things that I know I was talking about pointing out the direction of the helmet. Biggest thing, if you were looking through that helmet and through that visor, one of the biggest things you may notice while looking at the show is that whenever Mando's looking, he's kind of slightly looking down. He's not looking straight. So that's a big tip to keep an eye on when it comes to posing and what direction your action is really going into. Alright, jumping into our next pose, going back to more of a museum type of pose, something a little more simple again. Now changing up that pauldron there on his shoulder, going from the durasteel pauldron to the Beskar pauldron, moving on to different types of poses that are a little bit more specific to later on in the season, in that first half of the season. So here's just Mando getting ready to draw his blaster. Very simple. But once again, it's all about that body language, just putting a direction. Which way is he looking at? Who's that person that he's keeping an eye on? How is he getting ready? Arching his arm back there. Not only just kind of bending his elbow to be able to pull that blaster out of the holster, but also pushing back his shoulder there a bit. What direction does his shoulder need to be to kind of comfortably reach down and grab that blaster from the holster? Using, once again, that body language to convey the direction of where he's moving and convey the emotion of exactly what is happening in that moment. So you're kind of imagining where Mando is at that time, whether it be a kind of specific scene from the show or something that you imagine that a situation he may have got into either prior to the show or sometime in between those episodes that we've seen so far. So really kind of focusing on that backstory, focusing on the body language and the specifics that we go from there. So next we're actually going to get a little closer there on kind of the middle section as it turns around here. You'll be able to see a little bit more specifics of those different accessories that we have on there right now. But once again, don't think it's weird to kind of position those arms in a certain way. Arms don't need to lay directly flat at your sides. Think about how you talk with your hands or how you move with your arms when you make your way through a room. Think about those different things when you're posing someone, and also think about, once again, their motivation as they're making their way with that movement. Alright, so jumping to the next pose here. just to kind of go from the last one we were on here. Another simple pose, but once again conveying a story. Here we have Mando looking at that shell, getting ready to load his rifle, ready to go there. So you can actually see that the rifle that is provided by Hot Toys does have the ability to open up the top there so that you can position him in a way to make it look like he is putting in that round into the rifle, getting ready to go after his bounty, or in going ahead and protecting himself in those cases. So once again, just conveying a story and a situation that is going on, something very simple. Once again, the direction of the way that helmet is positioned, having it bent down just ever so slightly towards that round that he's looking at there in his hand. You can see there that using the hands in a way that may be different than what they were initially designed for. So I mean, of course, a hand like this is your relaxed palm. You can use it to hold the blaster, or just use it for natural kind of relaxed poses of either him walking or standing in those cases. But you can think outside the box a little bit and use some of those different accessories and costume pieces that are there on the figure to once again create that story and create a nice little image and a nice little kind of centerpiece there as part of the presentation of the figure in your collection. Once again, Mando's mask pointing down towards to kind of show his eye line directly towards the item that he's focusing on in that case. So it puts the focus not only on his hand just because it's raised, but also by the eye line of his mask to show you exactly what is being focused on at that point as part of that pose. As we go a little bit further here, we'll do a close-up of that blaster so you can see what it looks like with that raised up. So play around with those different accessories that your figure comes with. Now, one of the things I always highly recommend, especially if you are a brand new collector to this hobby, is always read the instructions that those Hot Toys figures come with. So Hot Toys always provides detailed instructions on how those figures work and any important information that you need to know about the different fragile sections of that figure. That way you don't have any disappointments of having anything break on you. So always be sure to check those things, especially if you're a new collector. That way you know exactly what is so easily breakable and the things you got to be a little bit more careful on that specific figure. So now we come to the final pose of today's video. Didn't want to do anything super crazy on today's video, at least for this first posing session, but just wanted to show some different looks. Here, just a pose of Mando getting ready for battle, ready to go in and fight some people. Now, something you may have noticed on some other poses that I used, but you could see a little bit more in this case, is one of those things is that windswept look on the cape. Now, the cape itself that's stock from Hot Toys, that one just lays flat and kind of just lays wherever you place it in those cases. A little tip and trick that I've learned from a couple other collectors here in the 1/6 scale community is using those black twist ties, the ones similar to something you get on a loaf of bread, and kind of entering those into the back of the boot and using it as a way to hold that cape up to get different types of looks when it comes to getting that windswept look for that Mando figure. Now, once again, using that body language to lean more forward into the action of this particular scene. Mando's eyeline looking down just ever so slightly, just because using the direction of where his eyes would be underneath the helmet to see the direction of exactly where he's on the attack. Getting a little closer here on the belt area, showing you where that gun has been pulled directly out of the holster. His hand clenched fist, ready to go into battle. As the cape kind of billows there in the wind, build your story behind your pose. Kind of think exactly what is happening in this exact moment and play around with that. Nothing is going to be perfect on the first go. That's one of the biggest things and the biggest takeaways from here. It's going to take a lot of practice and a lot of really kind of looking at those different things. So do not be discouraged as you first kind of get comfortable with posing your different figures, whether it be this figure or any other one that you have in your collection. But in those cases, I'd like to thank you again for taking some time to spend it here at our channel and review this first posing video. We do have a lot of different types of videos on the way as we continue to build the channel this year in 2021. So keep an eye out on our channel. If you are interested in any of those additional videos, please like and subscribe to our channel, and we will have continuing different uploads as the following weeks and months go from there. So thank you again. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and keep on collecting.